Hello, Aldo Figueroa here. In this video, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how you could unwrap a model. What I have here, what I'm going to make available to my students is this Polygon Hammer. And now I've already unwrapped this because I want to show you what the end results are going to look like. But unwrapping is simply getting your 3D model and you're basically unwrapping it onto a 2D surface. And this is using called UVs. Let me go ahead and open up the UV editor. I'm in the modeling menu set, UVs, UV editor, and you can see this one's already done. I'm going to show you how we could do this. And what unwrapping a UV is, this allows you to be able to unwrap the model. Basically, it's like you're taking this 3D surface and you're unwrapping it onto a 2D surface. What I have over here in this window is what's called a UV surface. Or you could also think about it is how you could apply a 2D object around a 3D surface. So we basically have to kind of have the coordinate space. We have to unwrap it. And what I have right here is my model unwrapped. And let me just show you what the end results are going to be. Right here is the uh, checker map that allows you to see the distribution of this checker texture, so you can make sure that the distribution looks good. You basically want to, this is only for reference, but you want to make sure that these are squares, and you can see how it has a UV. Within the UV coordinate space, basically everything, all the pieces of your model have to fit within this one-to-one UV coordinate space. Now it's called UV because if you look at it, it looks like a graph paper where you have an X, Y, but X, Y is already being used for your coordinate space. So instead you have your U and your V. So U goes left and right, V goes up and down. So let me go ahead and undo all of this stuff. Instead of undoing it, I'm actually going to go ahead and just go into, okay, we're already in the object mode. And typically when you open up a file, I'm just going to go to File, and I'm just going to go ahead and open up this same file. Don't save. So you can see what we have. Sometimes when you're modeling, you might start off with a base object. I started off with a cylinder, and you can see how this started off as a cube, the hammerhead. But I'm not going to focus on the hammerhead. I'm just going to focus on the handle here. And there's different ways that you could unwrap your model, your object. I'm going to show you a couple of them. What I want to do right now is what we have right here. When I select your object and I have the UV editor, it's showing you the distribution of the UVs that you have. Now UVs, if I right mouse click, it's another component for a polygon. We've already gone over edges, vertices, and faces, but now we have the UVs, which are either UV or shells. UVs are basically in the same coordinate space where your vertices are at, but unlike vertices, these are only for your texture space. So say, for example, I could potentially select one of these vertices and I can move it and nothing's happening to my model. But if I bring back my checker texture, and you can see how it's selected right here, as I move it, you can see how I'm warping the uh, the actual surface of the texture. So these are only work with the UVs. You can only move within your UV space. They have no, well, I guess it's not actually moving the surface of your 3D model. It's moving the texture surface. So if I right mouse click this time and select UV shells, let me hide this. You can see that you can select these different, what are called shells, these pieces of your model that are now separated into different sections. We can move them around. Now, as I look closely, like say, for example, I can look at this shape, like what's going on right here? Why is it all elongated? Because what's happening is, let me go ahead and right mouse click and select, let's go ahead and select edges. I'm gonna go ahead and select all of these, double click. Let me just show you what I have right here. I'm going to go ahead and scale these. I'm scaling them out just so you can see what's happening. In that these are all of these, because I extruded them when I created it, they're all basically line along that same edge right here. And let me go ahead and undo this. If I look back at my texture right here, you can see it's just that edge right there. So this is just all of these just basically being stretched out. Okay, well, what I want to do, I want to show you different tools. I'm going to go back to the object mode. So select this. Different tools that you can use. I am in the modeling menu set. Under UVs, there are different ways that you can map this. What I want to show you right now is I'm just going to show you a couple of them that are going to work specifically for this one. One, you could always use camera base. So if I just situate this right here, it's kind of like a profile view. Based off this camera, if I go to UV and tell it camera base, I'm just going to select, I'm not going to go to options. Just can't, well, let's check out the options really quick. Not much. I'm going to close this. I'm just going to go UV. I'm going to tell it camera base. What it's going to do, it's going to take a snapshot based off this camera. Now, this isn't really helpful if I have everything selected, because if I look closely, this is basically it's mirroring through. And if I hide this, you can see how it's basically that one area. Where this really is helpful is, let me deselect this. I'm going to select my paint selection tool. If I decided to select a series of faces, since these faces are selected, and what I want to do, I just want to make sure that I select. Now with this tool, you can't just go over it. You have to go over the center. So I don't want that one selected. So I could potentially do something like this where it's like, okay, or if I want to, I could always go to one of my profile views. Say, for example, my side view. It really gives me a profile. This is now my camera. UV, I'm going to tell it to camera base, click. And now what I have this one that's placed right here. And you can see how if I look closely, they're super condensed. I'm going to right mouse click. I'm going to tell it UV shell. I could also do this within the UV editor. I'm going to use my scale tool and click on this one. And I'm going to scale the U coordinate space until, if you look right here, you can see this is nice. I have a nice distribution. And for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and move this off to the side. Now, as you're working, you could place these anywhere within this UV space. Well, once you're done, you want them all to fit within the one-to-one space. So that's something that you could do. I could, within my perspective view, I could go ahead and select my different areas. I can see I could select it a little bit too much. That's okay. I could always deselect that. But I'm not necessarily going to continue this method. But that is a method that I could go about doing. I'm going to right mouse click and go back to object mode so that my entire handle is selected. What I could also do is, instead of that, there are also different mappings. There are some mappings based off of different shapes. There's a cylindrical, that's what I'm going to use. There's also planar and spherical. Depending on your object, some of these different tools might work better. For example, this one, cylindrical is going to work, should work pretty well. I'm going to go ahead and select it. What we have right now, you can see that since my entire model was selected, it is now placing these UVs across the entire model. If I only want a certain area, I have to just select those certain faces. But what I have right here is this tool, and it's a coverage tool. What I want to make sure is that since it's cylindrical, I want to make sure that, do I want to only have a certain amount of coverage, or do I want to do entire coverage? So I want all 360 degrees around it. Now, don't worry about these areas are here. Usually these are like the caps, the top and the bottom. You could always use a planar mapping or a camera-based mapping to be able to fix those areas. Now that we have this, let's go ahead and bring back our checker map. And you can see on this one how they're elongated. Up on top, right here, I'm going to go ahead and squeeze this down or bring this down. And though it's going longer right here, that's okay because we'll scale it down. Because again, we're trying to find distribution so that these look like squares. Right now, they look a little bit more like rectangles. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to bring this down. And yeah, I am kind of eyeballing it. Okay, that looks decent enough. Now, certain areas where we might get a couple of errors are like areas right here. It's because this is flat. Uh, I'm not going to worry about that at this point because those areas I'm not going to put any type of texture, but those are things to consider. I'm going to go ahead and select the UV shell. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to go ahead and use my scale tool, and I'm going to scale this down because I want it to fit within the one-to-one coordinate space. And here is the entire shape. Let's bring this map out, the map checker, so we can see what it looks like. Now, if I look at the bottom, especially at the bottom, you can see how this one doesn't look that good. So I'm going to try to situate this here. One thing you can do, I'm going to go ahead and select faces as an example. I'm just going to select these faces. I don't want to do a marquee selection here because remember, anything within that marquee selection will be selected. So I'm just selecting these faces right there. And here, what you can do, if I press F, it's going to now focus along these areas that are selected. So I want to do a mapping right here. I could go to UV camera base. So now a nice one that's created, but notice the difference in shape, how this one's super large. There might be instances where a certain part of your geometry requires a larger texture space. Say, for example, if you're working on a character where their face, you might want to have a larger texture map. But in this case, this is just a hammer. It's the bottom. I just want to be able to, maybe I might put an emblem down here, but I don't want it to be so uneven that the bottom's going to be super high resolution. Now for this object, I'm going to go and select object mode. And I could see it's like I'm going to go into show, select, view selected. And if I want to, I could do the same with the tap. But I don't want to do this right now because I want to show you yet another method that we could do this. Because I want to use some of the tools because maybe your object is going to be more complicated than this. So I want to go over a couple more tools. This time with my object selected, it's okay that I have my hammer head hidden for right now. To bring that back, you just go back to show, iset select, uncheck view selected. I'm gonna leave it hidden for right now. This time what I'm going to do is another method under UVs. There's also automatic. I'm going to go into the option box. Right here, you could tell it how many planes. I'm going to go ahead and just tell it to use the 6 planes. It's going to be front, back, left, right, top, bottom. And I want fewer pieces, or you can do less distortion. And let's go ahead and project. And it's giving us all these pieces. It might look like a lot, but that's okay. We can work with them. Let's bring back our checker. And you can see that what I want to do is it's really elongated. So I'm going to go ahead and uh, scale these out because I want these to look like squares. The actual texture, the checker texture. So that looks like squares. That looks all right. So let me go ahead and do this other side for the X. I'm going to go ahead and scale these out so that these two look like squares. Let's see a little bit more. And like I said, I am eyeballing it. All right, so we have this, but if I look closely, I'm going to hide this texture. We have lots of different pieces. That's going to be okay because sometimes this gives me an opportunity to be able to connect some of these pieces because maybe it's not going to be as simple as a cylinder that we have, but we need to connect these. One of the things that I should have mentioned earlier, let me go back to show select view selected, is that when you're creating a texture, sometimes you're going to have a seam. A seam is basically where your texture is going to connect. It's going to wrap all the way around. Now, say for example, for this object, maybe I want the seam to go right down the back right here. So what I'm going to do, but if I look closely, it has lots of different pieces, especially looking at the handle. So I want to connect some of these pieces. I'm going to do a series of cutting and sewing where I'm going to cut some pieces and I'm going to sew some pieces together. So if I go ahead and right mouse click and use uh, and select the UV shells, if I select this one, I could see where this one's at. I could move these for right now, not necessary, but I can see where they're going to connect. This piece is going to fit somewhere right here. We have another piece. Now, again, this is not necessary. You don't need to connect these or move these pieces around, but I'm just trying to figure out where my pieces are at. I'm going to have to make some cuts as well, because if I look at the bottom down here, I don't want all of this pieces down here. I just want the bottom. It has a little bit too much, so I'm going to have to slice some pieces off. So let me go ahead and cut some pieces before I start to connect them. So we'll start down here. So I'm going to right mouse click and select edges, because what I want to do, I want to select these and I want to cut them within the UV editor. Now you might have the UV toolkit might be minimized. So I'm going to go ahead and click right here where it says UV toolkit, and we have a series of tools. Up on top, you could always switch between your different components where you have your vertices, edges that I have selected, faces, UVs, and UV shells. So this is a quick way. We also have different tools as well right here. There's symmetry if you're working with symmetry. There's lots of different tools. Now I'm not going to go over all of them. I'm going to go over the tools I'll be using right now. Let me go ahead and make this window a little bit smaller so we can have a little bit more space to work with. Now I have this area selected. I want to cut them. And under cut and sew right here, there's cut. All this does, it's making a cut down here, only within the UV texture space. So I want to go ahead, what I do on one side, I want to do on the other. Let's see. I want to, you know what? Let me undo. I want to cut the entire area. I'm just going to double click right here. This makes it easier because I want to cut the entire area off. Cut. So what I could do if I want to, UV shells, I could select this one. I can move this over here so I could see what type of pieces that I'm working with. All right, that makes it helpful so I could see the pieces. Let's see, what I want to do is what area is, okay, I want a line right down the back. So let's see, I'm gonna go right here. I'm going to go to edges. I'm going to select right here. I'm going to go right here, double click on this so that all these are selected. I'm going to go ahead and tell it to cut. So right now I'm just making my cuts. I'm going to click on this one and then I'm going to zoom in all the way up here. I'm going to hold down. I'm just going to double click this one now. So it selects that entire area. And now notice within my UV texture, UV editor, it's showing you all these different edges. It's showing you where it's going to, what area is being selected. So I'm going to go ahead and just tell it to cut all the way along the bottom, all the way along the bottom. Okay, great. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to now put back together. I'm going to sew some of these pieces back together. I'm going to start with the handle right here. And I'm going to start off with a couple of smaller pieces down here. Now, if I say, for example, I can go back to my UV shells just to show you where these pieces are at. They're these small pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to edges. I'm just going to click on this one. Okay, I just want to make sure that only that one's selected. You can see where they're at right here. I'm going to go ahead and use this operation right here, which is under cut and sew, stitch together. It's going to move them so that they're one is next to the other. Now I'm selecting this one. I'm going to tell it to stitch together. Now, when I go and bring back the texture, it might not necessarily be perfect, but that's okay because I could then further adjust it again once I'm done. So let me go ahead and hide this. So I connected those pieces. I'm going to connect these two pieces together. So I'm going to connect this piece to the bottom down here. So and move together. So you can see it's connected down here. So let's see, this piece right here. So and move together. Now you can see right here, it's kind of warping in. I'll fix that later. And connect these right here. So and move together. Stitch together. Okay. And let's see. Then right here, select this one. So those are connected. Let's see, which side is okay. So these now, what I want to do, oops, I want to go right here, select these. I want to now sew these pieces. Let's see, we have this one and that one. So you see how it put it in here. Now it's going to start to warp. I'm not going to worry about that just yet. Let me go ahead and do the other side. It's over here. I'm going to connect these pieces first right here. So and stitch together, you can see how it connects them there. And now I'm going to be able to connect these pieces. Now you can see how this piece is going to have to fit in there. Boom, it's there. We're still going to have to do some adjustments. The same up here. Now there's these little faces that I have right here, or it's not faces, edges that I need to make sure that I select. So it's putting it together. You know what? I had one too many selected. It's the edge. I don't want this one. Okay, there it goes. It's very important to make sure. And you can see how I'm doing this a little bit more manually, but sometimes that's what you might need to do depending on your model. Okay, I have this stitched together. Great. So we have that. Well, you know what? It cut all the way down right here. Like for example, these I don't need to be separated down here. Now, stitch together is not going to work. In this case, because they're already next to each other, I could just sew them together and puts them together. And now looking at this piece right here, I can select this one. They're really small. It's going all the way up. I'm going to double click right here. Oh, I don't want to go all the way top. Okay, click from here then. Double click to this one. Oh, it's selecting all of them. I was hoping I could save some time, but now I'm spending more time. Okay, I've selected all those. And right here, I'm just connecting these areas all together. So I just continue to repeat this process until I select all of these different areas. Now I don't want to select them all at once, meaning all these different areas, because they might merge into themselves. Okay, so I have all of these stitched together. You can see how it's slowly connecting. Little edge right here. There it is. So now these are all connected, and all that's remaining is this area right here. Now this one, I want to show you another tool that we're going to be able to use, where if you start to notice, this starts to, which isn't bad, it's starting to kind of, what's the word? Arch, slightly arch. Like this one to here. Nope. Oh, it's so small. I have to zoom in. Okay, there it is, stitched together. So it's starting to arch, which again isn't necessarily a bad thing. But now I have it now, they're all separated into different pieces. I could bring back my texture and say, for example, if I look closely, this one right here gets having some weird uh, deformations that are happening that maybe I want to fix. What I could do now, I could right mouse click on this, UV shells, select this area right here, this UV shell. And one option is under unfold. You could try to use this unfold to see if it um, unwraps it. So what I want to do, let's see, optimize maybe. So okay, I'm gonna undo. That one didn't do me, it didn't do good. Let's see, how about unfold? That's giving me similar results. I don't want to, let's see, straighten shell. Nope. Straighten UVs. It kind of did a decent job. But now that I have this one, I could, I'll leave it right there. That looks better than it looked before. And keep in mind that certain areas, I'm not necessarily going to be putting a texture down here, but if you are, you could further unwrap your UVs. I could always go back to UV, and since I have this area selected, I could do another cylindrical if I want to. But that kind of defeats, well, no, it doesn't defeat it. I wanted to be able to show you, but now that I have this, it's like if I want to clean this one up, but this one looks good. So now that I have this one, what we need to do is I'm going to hide my texture. I need to put everything back within this area. So I'm just going to move these. And this is kind of like a puzzle piece where a couple of things. You don't want to put this right at the edge. You want to give yourself some spacing. You don't want these to overlap unless they're the same texture. Sometimes that's what some people do to be able to save some of the texture space if they're going to be the same texture. For example, like if they're the same object, it's going to be symmetrical. Right here, we have lots of extra space, which is totally fine. We could always maximize it. So say, for example, I know that this area is going to be larger. I would suggest that you try to scale them, if possible, together, unless a certain area requires a bigger area. All right, now that we have this, I'm going to go ahead and hide this. This object has now been unwrapped. And so let me just show you on this one. If I could use the rotate tool to rotate this. What I could also do, this is where if I tell it to straighten UVs, you can see it's now nice and straight. Let's bring back this one and let's go ahead and move this over this text right here. And I just want to see if that it's right side up, which it looks like it is. So then I'm going to put this one down here. You can see this one right here where it's like, okay, it's right side up. This one is as well. Let's see, let's look at this one at the bottom. Okay, great. So we know which area. Now these other pieces aren't as important, so they're there still. Let's hide this texture. And I'm gonna go ahead and in our next video, we're gonna continue from here. I'm gonna show you how we could now export our maps so that we could use a feature within Maya that uses Photoshop. So I'm going to show you how you could export this as a texture. But since we're going to be using Arnold, we're going to be taking or the Arnold render. We're going to be making some adjustments. All right. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.